So our first panel is on Indo-Pacific and technology cooperation, and we are delighted to have three incredible panelists with us. I'm going to make brief remarks, ask them to make 5 minutes of remarks, then we're going to have some moderated questions, but at any time, please be thinking about what questions you want answered. We want to make this as interactive as possible, so just wave your hand, and if I don't see it, throw your tent card at me. I will see that. First, I'd like to start out by introducing Professor Lee Gwanhoo. He is professor and chair of the Department of Information Technology and Analytics at American University. In this role, his topics include digital innovation, digital transformation, information privacy, cybersecurity, and he teaches digital leadership and strategy. He was principal investigator for the National Bureau of Asian Research's just launched report, U.S. and ROK Tech Cooperation, Export Controls, Data Policy, and Artificial Intelligence that you can find on the table over there. He serves as an advisor to the South Korean Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution and has consulted with the World Bank and Samsung on digital strategy issues. The next speaker will be Mireya Solis. She is director of the Center for Asian Policy Studies, the Philip Knight Chair in Japan Studies, and a senior fellow for foreign policy at the Brookings Institution. She's an expert in Japanese foreign economic policy, also international trade policy, and U.S. economic statecraft in Asia. She also served as a chapter author for the export controls chapter of NBR's newly published aforementioned report. She's also author of Japan's Quiet Leadership, Reshaping the Indo-Pacific, and a bunch of other books. Basically, Japan, Mireya. Then last and certainly not least, we have Lotta Danielsson, who is Vice President of the US-Taiwan Business Council. In this role, she's responsible for the day-to-day management of the council and their incredible work in Taiwan. And I'm going to go off script and just say, I took my first trip with the US-Taiwan Business Council in January of this year, and I have been leading trips like that, and I have been on trips like that, but never one this well done. We met with the current president, Tsai Ing-wen. We met with President-elect William Lai, with Vice President-elect Shao B. Kim. We met with all three party leaders. We met with key ministers. Even taxi drivers, as we were walking by, were yelling, "Hey, Rupert," her boss. I mean, everybody knows the U.S.-Taiwan Business Council. So my message is, if you care about Taiwan, make sure you grab Lotta's card before we leave. So to start today, I'm going to ask Professor Lee to make a few remarks. Then we'll go to Mireya, then to Lotta. And then, again, questions, just raise your hand. Professor Lee, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tami, for kind introduction. So I'll focus on U.S.-Korea relations. So the Indo-Pacific region is really central to Korea's economy, especially trade. So the region accounts for nearly 80% of Korea's exports and 70% of imports. So the significance of the region for Korea cannot be overstated. And then Korea's approach to the region transcends mere economic interest, covering addressing various issues, regional issues such as rising protectionism and supply chain vulnerabilities, and also economic resilience and security as well. So Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy departs from its previous strategic ambiguity, if you will. So the strategy is really the commitment to international laws and then norms and then rules. And then now the strategy really prioritizes Korea's cooperation with its allies on technology, innovation, and data. Although South Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy is closely aligned with the U.S. strategy in terms of strengthening technological ties and then fostering innovation ecosystem, there is one major difference. So whereas the U.S. views the PRC as a major threat to security and economic security, South Korea leaves room for embracing the PRC if it abides by international rules and norms and then universal values. So this more nuanced strategy is essential and crucial for South Korea's economic resilience and security and its role for regional stability. So with the upcoming AI Safety Summit this year in Seoul, and also ongoing initiatives such as US-Korea Next Generation Critical and Emerging Technology Dialogues, Korea is really set to solidify its leadership role in technological dialogue and also regional economic stability. Also, the recent US, Japan, and Korea trilateral developments significantly impact the global tech industry cooperation and landscape. And this partnership amidst China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region is really pivotal. And then the partnership is basically a strategic alignment between three countries, which is essential for their technological superiority and also economic security and also regional stability as well. Now, the future of this cooperation hinges on formulating shared vision and then balancing the private sector competition with public-private cooperation, and also embracing broader sectors in this important technological dialogue. Now, I don't know how much time I have, but let me give you a quick summary of this recently published NBR report, special report. I had the pleasure of working with Doug Stock of NBR as editor of the report, and also I wrote the introduction, and then several leading subject matter experts from the US and South Korea were paired to write three chapters on export controls, AI, and data policy. So against the backdrop of escalating, the global tech competitiveness, and also the urgency for better governance for cross-border data flows, this report really delves into those important issues. The first chapter focuses on the updated US export controls, which impacted South Korean semiconductor companies that have extensive operation in China. You mentioned the Samsung's early investment in semiconductor. I was privileged to actually work for Samsung's semiconductor business before I came to the United States, 1993 to 1998. That's when Samsung was really trying to catch up with NEC Toshiba in terms of DRAM business and so on. So these export controls are very important, but at the same time, we need to make sure we have a harmonized strategy between US and Korea in terms of technology export, so that we balance the economic security and also national security at the same time. The second chapter focuses on AI's transformative role, underlined by recent US policy shift toward more securing safe and then trustworthy AI development and use. But at the same time, as the dominant leader in the AI space, particularly in the generative AI space, the United States is likely to be reluctant to implement compulsory regulations that might stifle the innovation and adoption of AI technology and use. So that being said, the challenge is to figure out how to develop a global governance framework that balances AI innovation as well as AI safety and trustworthiness. Third chapter examines data policy issue. In the past, different approaches to data policy between US and Korea presented a little bit challenging in terms of cross-border data flows. For example, Korea's some robust yet stringent data privacy laws and also data localization requirements kind of hindered data flow, cross-border digital trade and commerce. Now, last year, South Korea made significant amendments to PIPA, Private Information Protection Act, and expanded the legal basis for enabling cross-border transfer of personal data. So that opens up a lot of opportunity for the United States companies to do more business with Korea. So that kind of sums up the report. And
very helpful. Now moving to Mireya.
Thank you very much, Tami, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me to the conference today. It's been a pleasure to be part of this project, and I can say that with this view, we cannot compete. This should be the location, I think, for your event. It's a wonderful venue. So very briefly, I have, I think, 5 minutes or so. I'm going to cover 3 main points. First, I want to talk a bit about the geostrategic context influencing the shift in U.S. technology policy. Second, I want to get to what I think is the heart of the matter in many of these discussions today, and that is how is the United States doing in bringing partners along as it changes its policies on technology, especially in lieu of how it's defining competition with China. And thirdly, what are some challenges in implementation? I think, Tami, you alluded to that. It's been a bumpy road and it will continue to be bumpy. What lessons can we learn so far from what has happened? And I'm going to use mostly some insights from the export control chapter that I had the pleasure to co-author with Mr. Pak, also in the room today. So, when I mentioned the geostrategic context, there's so much happening. Clearly, there's a world in transition, in flux. But I'm going to, for the sake of brevity, just focus on the US-China angle to it. And I think that great power competition is clearly one of the main drivers behind the renewed focus on the US on technology as part of its domestic competitiveness agenda, but also its foreign policy. And it's, of course, striking how much the US-China relation has shifted in a matter of decades. We went from an approach mostly about engagement to now one defined by a strategic competition, if not rivalry. Part of this has to do with China's rise, the tremendous growth that it experienced for several decades, but also the fact that China embarked in a military modernization campaign. But it goes beyond these structural changes, the acquisition of capabilities of China, also policy choices that have been made, and in particular developments in its political system, a growing authoritarian bent, changes in its economic system, the waning of the appetite for economic reform that in many ways informed China's accession to the WTO at the beginning of the century, and of course a more assertive China's foreign policy, I think are very important elements of why the United States is taking a more skeptical view of China. I think that for the United States, the China challenge has grown in complexity. When we look mostly at the foreign economic policy issues, the old concerns have not gone away. They're very clear in our domestic political debate, and clearly in Washington, that's all what we hear about, politics, but certainly concerns about the Chinese unfair trading practices, the theft of intellectual property, the loss of factory jobs to China. Those concerns are still very much there, but now we have added to them the concerns about China's strategic drive to become a technological giant, and doing so by reinvesting in the state capitalism model with a very large program of subsidization of semiconductor and other advanced technologies, but also the increasing use of national security controls to govern large chunks of the economy, but also using its economic clout abroad both as a tool of engagement with infrastructure finance, with a very a strong push on trade negotiations, but also using the sticks with instances of economic coercion. So it is that mixed and very complex package that I think is influencing U.S. policy vis-a-vis China. But this is not a world of two by any means. And clearly the United States also responding to other developments, and its actions are influencing everyone, and certainly influencing our closest partners and allies. So what we're seeing, I would say, is a broader shift, the securitization of international economic policy. I think that there are new priorities in the United States. There is an emphasis on building advanced manufacturing ecosystems in the homeland, about protecting the most sensitive technologies. And we see rapid developments in all areas of tech policy covered in the report, but certainly there is a concern and an effort to try to bring our closest partners with us, because clearly it does not work for the United States. The United States cannot achieve its goals of technology, promotion, and protection if it does not work well with other tech powers. And this is certainly true in the Indo-Pacific. This is a neighborhood where you not only have China, but you also have very advanced Asian technological powers who have close security relations with the United States. I'm referring to, of course, the Republic of Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. And then the challenge there is, how do you then do all these important tasks with your partners. I think it's significant that we see in the bilateral agenda the emergence of an economic security track, of a technology cooperation track, but also in the trilateral effort. We saw that at Camp David between the United States, Japan, and South Korea. And so therefore, in the goal of developing that advanced manufacturing ecosystem, I think in the past few years, we've witnessed a real wave of investment from Taiwanese, Japanese, South Korean firms that are really changing the American economy in areas where the United States has identified as critical for supply chain resilience. I'm talking about semiconductors, but also in terms of its transition to the green economy. And it's also very clear that if we want to restrict China's access to the most sensitive technologies, we need the cooperation of these partners who are generating those technologies. However, and here I go to my last point because I feel the moderator is giving me the look that I'm about to run out of time, but the cooperation does not happen in autopilot. It's not going to be easy. We can think, of course, we know, of course, that there's strong convergence, there's strong security interest, there's concerns about the direction of China, but these partners are not defining the issues exactly the same way we are. And when we devise the policy, when we have the sausage made, we also made some moves that clearly create a lot of concern. Let me just highlight one and then offer three possible ways to address this. I'm going to go basically on the export control issue. When the United States redefined its goals of competition with China and advocated for the need to stall Chinese technology in the most advanced sectors, for example, limiting China's ability to procure the most advanced chips, to train AI models, to advance supercomputing, and so forth. South Korean firms with large manufacturing operations in China with large farms were left in a limbo because they received a one-year waiver to be able to bring in production equipment to keep operations running. There was a major improvement when a year later they received the end validated user status, which eliminated a lot of these headaches. But I would say that this amounted to a damage control remedy. It is not yet a full alignment of export control policies. That is a task that remains to be undertaken. And therefore, if we're really going to boost this technological cooperation to that level, we need to address this. Now, how can we do this? I would suggest three basic first steps from our joint chapter with Mr. Pak. One is, of course, to make sure that the United States stays true to the stated goal of export controls being a small yard, high fence. There's a lot of concern if we were to very quickly expand the regulated areas. Second, I think it's very important to improve communication on risk assessment, threat perception. So if we're telling everyone that China developing these technologies, which are very available commercial technologies, has risks because they can be used for military development, it's important that we share those risk assessments with trusted partners so that they understand why we're doing what we are doing. And finally, I think it's unavoidable that we understand that we are all risking retaliation from China. And there are going to be some shared risks, but there are going to be vulnerabilities that are specific to each partner. So if China were to use the export controls on critical minerals against everyone, we all take a hit. But we must understand that South Korea has this particular exposure to retaliation from China given the sunken costs of having invested in these large manufacturing capabilities in China. So whatever we do, we should be mindful that these issues do not hit us the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Now turning to Lotta.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, thank you. So I'm going to thank you so much to MBR and thank you to Tami for the great glowing recommendation. I appreciate that. We are here to talk about Taiwan, which is one of my favorite topics. I wanted to drill down a little bit further onto what Taiwan has done on innovation strategy. They've spent the last about 50 years really focused on technology and on innovation. And I basically see that as three major building blocks. And for those of my colleagues who are working on other places, you've heard some of these before. So the three major building blocks have been science parks in Taiwan. They have been industrial, government-invested research institutions. They have been also tax incentives and those types of government investments. So that's kind of the basis for Taiwan's technology and innovation development over the last 50 years or so. Over the last sort of 10 years or so, we also added into that the Asian Silicon Valley Development Plan, which has really built into, rather than just focusing on infrastructure, focusing on trying to build sort of physical opportunities for companies, is to really look at what can you do to make an ecosystem that's innovation-driven, an innovation-driven sort of environment, as opposed to just the physical ways to continue to drive innovation. I think one of the things that we are looking at for Taiwan right now is, as Tami alluded to, we have a new president in Taiwan that's going to take office in May. President William Lai has come up with a project that he's calling the National Project of Hope, and that includes a lot of different things, but it also includes building on Taiwan's existing and really powerful technology industry to kind of move up the value chain. So rather than just chip production, to do chip design, really focused on artificial intelligence, as well as focusing on 5G and cybersecurity and so on. He has also been talking about building on this Asia Silicon Valley effort that Taiwan has been undertaken, which is really talent development and then also startups. So trying to build the startup environment in Taiwan, in particular, financing on startups. So that's kind of the vision going forward. But for anybody who's done Asia at all, some of those things, the science parks, research institutes, sounds very familiar. What has Taiwan done that's a little bit different, perhaps, than other countries in the region? Well, I think one part is that it's been very driven by the central government in Taiwan rather than local governments. So tax incentives has been a really important piece of that, in particular when it comes to research and development and intellectual property rights. So that's one piece. The second piece has been really allowing companies in Taiwan to decide which technologies they want to pursue, rather than kind of dictating that from the government side, which is we've seen in other places. And then the final piece is really that the government provides an overarching framework for how to drive innovation, but has really given its government ministries the ability to do on-the-ground operations and really try to drive that and make decisions. And that has given Taiwan a bit more agility, I think, than perhaps some other places in the region. But the important consideration for Taiwan has also been international alliances and cooperation. And of course, the United States is Taiwan's most important partner on technology. There is a lot of trust there. They've worked together for many, many decades, and trust is really important in this space. There are a number of current initiatives that touch on technology and semiconductors in the U.S. and Taiwan relationship, some driven by the State Department, some driven by the Department of Commerce. But there's also quite a few new science and technology agreements and cooperation projects that are ongoing between the two. Taiwan has really been focused on trying to develop a good relationship with Taiwan on tech issues, and they're being supportive as much as they can on the United States technology policy issues. One of them being export controls, which we've talked about, where Taiwan has been quite supportive for the U.S. efforts. But Taiwan is also very interested in working with their other partners in the region. And I think this is always something that they want to try to do. The new southbound policy is a government policy where they're looking at technology sharing, trying to build connections between Taiwan research institutes and Taiwan science parks with other similar organizations around the region and around the world. The National Project of Hope actually continues to build on that, where they're looking at potentially doing Indo-Pacific science parks driven by the Taiwan side, as well as overseas startup centers, where they were looking at trying to develop startups around the region, in particular in Japan, as well as in places in Southeast Asia. So, there's also Taiwan is trying to really build this network out of their regional partnerships. The National Science and Technology Council within the Taiwan government has announced that they've signed science and technology agreements with 43 countries around the world, and that includes both Australia and the Philippines, for example. In addition, research centers like the ITRI, which is one of Taiwan's premier research institutes, and it served as the incubator for TSMC and UMC, the behemoths in semiconductors. And ITRI is also going out there and looking to try to build in the region. For example, they just opened a new office in Thailand, and they've been talking about working with Malaysia. And so they're really reaching out to build this sort of network out in the region. One of the questions that I was asked was, what are the challenges for Taiwan when it comes to building these types of connections in the region? And I wrote down one word: China, right? It is the one big issue. Taiwan does what it can. You have the 500-pound gorilla in the room sort of looking over everybody's shoulder. It makes it hard to sign new agreements, and it really narrows Taiwan's options. So that's really, that's a big, big issue. But I also think it's important to note that not only are we looking at collaboration in the region on technology policy, on innovation policy, but we're also looking to build relationships with our competitors. So Taiwan's competitors are South Korea and Japan. There are other places around the region. And so we have to really consider how does Taiwan manage this sort of collaboration with their competitors? How does that work? Taiwan in particular are worried about the hollowing out of their star industry, the semiconductor industry, and hollowing out of their technology industry. And so that is something that they're keeping in mind as they're trying to build this network of collaboration in the region. In particular, they're worried about losing their talent, because this is key. The talent shortage is crucial for everybody in the region and around the world. And they're really worried about losing out in that extremely competitive environment, because the wages in Taiwan are relatively low. And so how do you kind of build new relationships into the region and into the world when you have to worry about losing the people that you really need to continue to build further? And I think I'll probably stop there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask one question, and that's to give you guys a chance to get your really smart questions ready. But my sort of easy question, I want to thank you all for really helping us get a good, broad landscape view of the issue. But broadly speaking, how do your countries that you focus on perceive the regional landscape in the Indo-Pacific, and how elevated are their threat perceptions of the PRC? And then kind of a sub-question, how concerned are the U.S. partners about the reliability of the U.S. leadership and the U.S. commitment on technology issues in particular? And are there any major tensions between the U.S. and your country of focus that could undermine this broader bilateral tech relationships? And if so, any advice? Who would like? Yeah, please, Professor Lee.
Thank you. So from South Korea's standpoint, the regional landscape in the Indo-Pacific is viewed as both an opportunity and a challenge. And then the elevation in the threat perceptions regarding the PRC, China is really significant for Korea. And then the PRC's assertive policies and actions, especially regarding some of their territorial claims and then trade practices, really prompted South Korea to reassess its strategic priorities and their alignments. So having said that, South Korea sees a strong alignment with the U.S. and its allies, really critical and essential to its economic security and resilience. And also South Korea, such collaborations are perceived as vital to countering the challenges posed by the PRC's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region. So in this context, the U.S.-Korea relation is more than just bilateral interactions. Really, we are looking at the more broader regional strategy that encompasses values such as democracy and then industry openness and respect for international law and norm. And in terms of U.S. leadership and commitment to reliability, Obviously, South Korea's standpoint, the reliability of U.S. leadership commitment, especially regarding technology issues, is very, very important and critical. And then our concerns about U.S. reliability primarily stem from past fluctuations in U.S. foreign policy and commitments, especially under different administrations. But the shifting dynamics can lead to uncertainties in long-term planning from the business perspective in terms of, because some of the critical technology require, such as semiconductor, long-term planning and investment, and the unpredictability of U.S. policy and commitment makes really the business, Korean business, difficult to find a long-term clear plan going forward.
Very helpful. Mireya?
Thank you, Tami. That was a big question. And since I think a lot of my presentation was about the rise of threat perception and how that has certainly happened in the U.S., let me just get to the question of credibility and tensions and how to manage them. I do think that the U.S. has a credibility problem in Asia and elsewhere, and it has to do with the zigzag of U.S. politics. And, you know, when we go from one administration to the other, there's some consistency in a tough on China approach, but there's a sea of difference when it comes to the thinking about alliances and building unilateral networks. And, you know, we saw from the Trump administration, I think it was a more unilateral take, and now the Biden administration trying to build these coalitions of like-minded countries. Where they succeed or not, I think, is a question. But certainly, the zigzag of U.S. politics is a factor. Another one is, of course, that there have been very sharp turns in U.S. Policy, and we should not be giving these surprises to our partners. You know, the list now is becoming long. It's the exit of TPP. It's the dropping of the digital economy negotiations in IPEF. It's the sharp reversal in position on WTO e-commerce negotiations. It's the surprise of the RIA on the domestic assembly, North America assembly requirement. And then we engage in damage control exercises. And that's certainly not the best way to manage these partnerships. And of course, another element to the credibility problem is that because we have very polarized political system these days and gridlock, we find that most initiatives come in the form of executive action, which means that they're easy to, well, not easy, but they get signed, but they can be reversed. And that also then introduces the question of durability. So that, I think, creates a lot of tension, uncertainty, and so forth in how the U.S. handles its relations with close partners, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and others. What can we do? I mean, two suggestions. One is, I think we need a very different approach. I'm using your example on critical minerals. We created red tape, and now our partners have to go and negotiate free trade agreement status if they don't already have it. And then going by the U.S.-Japan agreement on critical minerals, it's not a substantive agreement. It is about checking the box that you have now negotiated an agreement. It doesn't open any markets. I think that it would be better if we think about how we can use our capabilities to invest in mining, in processing, and not cut our legs off by imposing these red tape. And the other one, going by our recommendations in the export control chapter, I think it's important to begin to think about how we build a plurilateral regime on export controls where there's genuine input. Not just as when the U.S. moves first and asks others to come along, but moving together, designing the direction of the following steps.
That's very helpful. Lotta?
I want to associate myself with what you were saying. What you're saying, I totally agree on that. For Taiwan, of course, the PRC is the big threat. They do what they can, just like I said. But tensions with the United States tends to be a little bit more on the non-tech related issues, sort of defense and political issues. But there are, again, like you said, a very, many changes that are going to happen over the next year. We got President Lai coming in. We have potentially a new administration in the U.S. And that is something that they're really concerned about. And how do you continue to work with somebody when you don't know exactly what they're going to be doing? So some policy clarity, I think, would be very important if we can get that way.
Oh, you dreamers. Yes. That's very helpful. Let's throw it open to the audience. We've got 15 minutes left. I want to keep us on schedule. What burning questions, Ambassador Kim and then the gentleman behind.
And on the issue of
And a microphone is coming your way. Yes, I know you heard a lot about the IRA
Yeah.
being in Korea.
Well, it's now United States are facing a presidential election, and Republican government is not very positive about climate change and sustainability of the subsidies. Then, if next presidency reverse IRA, I think is a problem, and also subject to ISD dispute settlement will be raised because of policy change affected investment, large investment, private companies. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, let's throw that to our experts here.
I can start, but yeah, so I've been talking with a lot of Korean businessmen and policymakers regarding IRA last year because they're so confused and scared and then afraid of the full implications of IRA. Number one, it was difficult to grasp the full implication of IRA at the beginning, but then later, they the damage control and so on, as Mireya said. That's the real challenge because, with the current IRA provisions, Korean companies are investing heavily in plants and manufacturing facilities in the United States. It may be easy to reverse the policy in the next administration, but it may not be that easy for the companies who invest heavily in the United States with the facility and everything, reverse everything, right? So that's why the South Korean is seeking to get more clarity and also reassurance about the reliability of U.S. policy and commitment to these types of the provisions. So that's all I can say. I don't know what's going to happen in the election, but personally, I'm hoping for the best, but we'll see.
One of the points that's so ironic is that 35 years ago when I was working in Seoul, we were always complaining to the Korean government about, you need to make your policies more predictable. We need to know what's coming. And now the Koreans are very predictable. It's the U.S. administration that is, and I love your zigzag policies. We're going one direction and then immediately turning the other. And I think American companies don't realize the depth of Korean investment. And it's not just Samsung and Hyundai. It is across the board. It is entertainment. It is food. It's logistics. It's defense. It's solar. Korea Inc. has bet on the U.S. But if we zigzag again, those investments may not stand. So if we want to, and I should note that these Korean investments are very well paid, good investments. This is, they're not coming to take advantage of the U.S. and then skip out with a profit. They are investing in critical areas. We need to welcome that investment and we need to ensure that it's sustainable.
I would just add a couple of observations to that very good question. First, I think I would make a distinction between market trends and then policy direction. I think on market trends, I think we're at an interesting moment for electric vehicles. The expectations that they would disseminate very quickly have not panned out. And so that's a reality of how much it takes for the consumers to think about these big investment, how much it takes to build infrastructure to make electric vehicles really viable in the U.S. So that's one element. The other one is the policy direction. Yes, if there's a change in administration and you have a president who is skeptical of climate change, that certainly is going to affect the overall climate. But I think we're still better off in the sense that the IRA has been approved by Congress. There's some resilience, now that's the word of choice these days, built into it. It's not like IPEF that, it just goes away. So that I think adds a little bit more predictability than to other arenas. But what I believe is going to be where a lot of the action is not climate oriented per se, but it's going to be very big in the U.S. trade agenda is China's EV dominance or push. And I think that that's going to, we're raising with Europeans, we're raising a lot of discussion in DC, the possibility of using more broadly tariffs, the possibility of targeting Chinese investments in Mexico, when 2026 comes, the USMCA is going to be revised, perhaps try to tighten rules of origin. So all these, that's I think the critical issue here, that we're talking about technological innovation, we're talking about geopolitical competition and old-fashioned protectionism, and that's your cocktail of the day.
Lotta, did you want to add a point before? We'll go to the microphone to the gentleman.
Okay. This may be a more.
I'm sorry, if you could please identify yourself.
Oh, yes. So
Yeah,
I'm Andrew Sloss. I work for a small startup looking at sort of relooking at basic logic in semiconductors. So I'm looking at the landscape and I see, generative AI, possibly will come into the semiconductor industry and, design chips and all of these things. And then I see copyright and IP as a separate subject, right? And really my question is, we're going to probably have to relook at copyright and IP right across the spectrum, because if generative AI is only as good as what we put into it,
yeah.
Quality in, quality out, right? We're going to have to work out how each country participates. And really it's a hard policy decision because you're giving away some of your IP into these new systems, and these new systems then create new products. And I was wondering, has that level of sort of policy thoughts being discussed? And hopefully I described that well enough.
Professor Lee, can we ask you to can you speak into the microphone?
Yes. So I can start. This is a very delicate and then complicated issue. So let me put it this way. Generative AI really revolutionized the way we think about everything. And then the thing is, it's very difficult to predict where it's going to go. Now, when I talk to business executives, they're saying that they are updating their AI or Gen AI strategy or plan every 6 months. Because they used to have a 3-year digital plan or whatever, but it doesn't work that way. 6 months is already too long. And even in higher education, we are revising our curriculum and trying to infuse AI, integrate AI into the curriculum, but then realize that AI as we know now may not AI we know tomorrow. So that's a big challenge. So having said that, copyright and IP are really critical issues. The thing is, those big tech companies who are developing large language model foundation models, they don't disclose the data they use, right? So we know that they are using some of the copyrighted and the materials, but that they don't disclose what the data they are using to train their model. The first step is to make sure that they are obligated to share and disclose what data they use to train the model, so that we know what data went into the model, so that we can talk about the copyright and IP issues more clearly. And also it requires harmonization between different countries, right? So large language model, foundation model, doesn't care where the data comes from, whether the data comes from US or from Korea, from PRC. They don't care. They are like consuming data like crazy. And then if different countries have different policies and regulations toward IP and copyright, then we have very conflicting regulation requirements at work for those machine learning models. So that's a real challenge.
Lotta?
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right, is that this is going to be an issue. Trademarks, copyrights, IP protection, trade secrets, all of that is very difficult to get on, to really get your head around. Again, I'll come back to this issue of trust. Taiwan foundries have been taking outside, so US, NVIDIA, for example. I know that when NVIDIA spoke at the tool-in ceremony at TSMC in Arizona, the head of NVIDIA basically talked the entire 5 minutes about trust, how much they trust the Taiwan foundries to do what needs to be done without having to worry about these sorts of issues. And that's why I think trust is going to be a really important piece. Building trust between all the companies, all the countries that are going to be working together is going to be the key.
Yes, you have a question, ma'am? Can we get a mic over here? Thank you.
I'm Sophie Chen from Taipei Economy and Cultural Office. And first, I would like to thank you all the panelists for addressing the strategic importance of Taiwan and U.S. partnership, especially in the semiconductor industry. And I would like to ask the panelists to spend more time to address some policy advice both to Taiwan government and the U.S. government in facilitating this partnership between Taiwan and the U.S. because Taiwan, the partnership between these two sides is very important to Taiwan. Thank you.
Any advice for the two governments? Lotta, we'll start with you.
Advice, yeah, continue to communicate, and I think that that's something that we've seen on all, in a broad scope over the last several years. I've started working at the US-Taiwan Business Council in 2000. For many years, there was never any way that we could get USTR, for example, to talk about Taiwan. It was completely just a wall. That has changed tremendously just over the last couple of years. We're now in the middle of negotiating a 21st century trade agreement. And so, there's continued to have hope that even though there's some issues that have come up, and we can try to continue to communicate to talk about that. As far as policy, I think there's so many initiatives that are working between the U.S. and Taiwan right now. One thing that I would say is that it's very difficult to know how they all work together. So I won't say there's a bunch of abbreviations for various different initiatives at the moment, and they're all covering some of the same things. And to try to kind of maybe consolidate that is definitely one of the things that I think is important. But
Mireya?
I would just add, thank you, Greta. One observation. I think it's important that we move away from a hub and spoke, how the U.S. talks to South Korea, how the U.S. talks to Japan, how it talks to Taiwan, and we begin to think about network initiatives, dynamics. And one where I think is also very promising is Taiwan, Japan. I think that there's been a very successful experience with the investments of TSMC, and they just announced that they're going to make additional investments. So. And I think also South Korea, Samsung has invested in a research facility in Japan. And I think that all of these begins to bring resilience, and we can all benefit from these diversification efforts. So I think that thinking broadly about weaving a fabric of ecosystems of advanced manufacturing, I think would be the way to go.
I just echo those points. I think instead of focusing on bilateral relations between Taiwan and US, I think if Taiwan joins, for example, Chip4 Alliance is a good example, joins other countries working with the US together as a bigger group, bigger network, I think that's a more effective way of solidifying the relation between Taiwan and the US. If they focus on just bilateral relations, that could be an easy target from the PRC in terms of retaliation.
And it's off, the PRC will put, there was a lot of discussion initially whether to bring Taiwan into IPEF. But the view was if we did, it would really limit the number of countries we could get because Taiwan would be effectively shutting down countries because of that. And on that trip that the US-Taiwan Business Council arranged in January, someone threw out a crazy idea that I thought it was really good. It was, why not give Taiwan observer status at IPEF? They're not a formal member, but let them go and participate and hear as they have observer status in other areas. So I think we have to all be creative and think out of the box with Taiwan. But everyone has a vested interest in helping Taiwan. 50% of global trade goes through the Straits of Taiwan. One of the many reasons Korea and Japan are so supportive is they get all their energy that goes through the Straits of Taiwan. Other great, and these are excellent questions. Young lady, right there.
Hi, Emma Rafaela from the Pacific Northwest National Labs. Just sort of piggybacking off of the previous question, I'm curious to hear more about, I think, Lotta, you had mentioned some of the sort of southbound policy, but just how there's maybe kind of tri or quadrilateral sort of cooperation on sort of all of these countries and their involvement in kind of growing capacity in Southeast Asia.
Thanks, Emma.
Yeah, I mean, the Taiwan government is really focused on trying to build, like I said, their networks into Southeast Asia, with the new Southbound policy being the number one sort of overarching focus that they've done. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the Lai administration does on this, because this is something that he has talked about, trying to expand into the region. Everybody in Taiwan knows that they need to move away from China. And they've been trying to do that for many years now, trying being the operative word. And the new Southbound policy is a key part of that, moving into Southeast Asia and trying to really continue to develop other partnerships around the region and globally as well. You know, looking at Germany, looking at the United States, and so on. But I think that that's kind of where we're gonna end up. Exactly what that will look like under a Lai administration, I'm just not sure, and I don't know that they are sure as well.
Other comments? Other questions? Gentleman in the corner. And again, please introduce yourself.
Hey, thanks so much. My name is Cole McFall from the Center for Security and Emerging Technology, and I was also contributed to the AI chapter for the report. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, I think there's been like a narrative that the United States is a security partner, China is an economic partner, and I think that starting to change a little bit, especially as you're seeing shaky economic situation in China and they're getting shut out of global value chains in kind of these emerging technologies. And the kind of this thing about market access, I think is not so, companies are not as hopeful that they'll gain huge market access to China. I was wondering, one, if you agree with that. Two, how does that change the calculus, or how is that changing the calculus for these third-party countries like Korea, Japan, and Taiwan? And then we've talked a little bit, and I think it's really interesting about some of these new institutions that are being created. I was wondering how sticky you think those kind of mini-laterals will be going forward, especially as we think about future administrations, and if there's anything more we should do or we can do to kind of increase institutionalization of those types of mechanisms. Thank you.
Please.
Those were really great questions. I hear a lot about the U.S. providing security, China providing the economic opportunity. That has never really been exactly true. It's obviously much more complex and nuanced, but it's true that it captures, there's an element of truth to that. And when I think about it, in particular, I think that for the U.S., the lack of leadership on trade liberalization really hurts us, because we're not really speaking the language of the region, because we're not really providing, confidence, predictability, the way in which it would be available, say, if the United States has stayed on the TPP. That certainly wasn't a strategic own goal. The United States does provide a lot of stability to the region through its alliance network and through a lot of what it does for freedom of navigation, and nobody wants the United States to walk away from the region. I think it's well understood that that would not be in the interests of most inhabitants of the region. And it's also true that China, I think, that had a narrative that was very positive of being, a tremendous economic performance, very high-speed growth for so many years. And now I think that we're beginning to see an important moment. China remains formidable. China has tremendous strengths, and we should not then take the idea that always it's very easy to have that countries have a single trajectory and they're locked in. Far from that, but certainly the slowdown of the Chinese economy brings questions about mismanagement and what happens when you have extreme centralization and the mistakes that are made, and the fact that China also faces structural headwinds because of demographic change, and the security-first approach is hurting, I think, Chinese innovation, productivity, and the ability to entice investment. And that's going to hurt China's growth prospects going forward. So again, this is a fluid moment, and I think it would be very important for the United States to rethink. I come from Washington. The politics are not changing. I am a little, Tami called us optimist before. I'm not an optimist here. But certainly when we're developing these economic resilience and technology innovations, we should be mindful that we don't incur further own goals. The IPEF has been the U.S. economic initiative towards the region. For me, it's always been a plan B. It does not compare to what the TPP could offer. But even there, we just witnessed a misstep. At the time of the San Francisco APEC Leaders Summit meeting, there was an expectation that there would be an early harvest agreement. And nothing happened because it was not possible to get the developing members of IPEF to agree to binding labor standards without the benefits of market access. There was a position from some U.S. senators, and therefore it was not possible to announce that early harvest agreement. And that hurts us because our partners were expecting that that kind of progress would be made. But more importantly, it showed that there were now new red lines that we were not aware of, or our partners were not aware of. They were told if it's not about tariffs, it will go. Now it turns out that if it doesn't have the labor standards, it will not happen. So again, there's a lot that we can do with the tools we have, understanding the domestic constraints, and certainly the strong performance of the U.S. economy is one of our strongest assets, and the contrast there with what China's undergoing now is also significant.
Just to add to that, Korea and U.S. alliance. Korea is the economic, technological, and also security alliance with the U.S., whereas primarily with China is more about economy and trade. So having said that, now the U.S. interest, economic interest, and Chinese are kind of conflicting, and that kind of pressures Korea to reassess its strategic, priorities and their alignment. And then my observation is the current administration, Yoon administration, is, aligning closer with the U.S. and slowly staying away from the PRC. So we are investing, as I said earlier, heavily in the United States at the cost of losing business with the PRC. So that's why it is extremely important for us to have a reassurance about the reliability in U.S. policy and commitment going forward. But at the same time, we want to keep options open because we don't know what's going to happen to the election here and then hold the dynamics in the geopolitical tension. So we want to keep the options and not lose China altogether so that, under certain conditions, we can re-engage China again.
Well, I think we're now at the witching hour. Why don't we take a 10-minute break, have some coffee, but please be back here at 10:50. And please join me in thanking this incredible panel. This was excellent.